I thought hiding in my son's car would be the perfect surprise after 2 lonely years without my husband Robert. At 68, I needed Marcus more than ever, and lately, our weekly dinners felt rushed, distracted. So when I spotted his silver Honda parked outside my house that Thursday afternoon, mischief sparked in my chest. I crept through the unlocked back door and folded myself behind the driver's seat, giggling like a schoolgirl. But when Marcus slid in with his wife Sarah, my smile vanished. Sarah's voice cut through the silence like a blade. "Your mother's dementia is getting worse. The doctor confirmed she's incompetent. Once we get her to sign the power of attorney tomorrow, we can finally sell her house and access her accounts." My blood turned to ice as I crouched motionless behind the leather seat, every muscle in my body screaming to move, to speak, to demand an explanation. But some deeper instinct kept me frozen as Marcus started the engine and pulled away from my driveway. The familiar hum of the Honda became a soundtrack to my nightmare. "Are you sure Dr. Peterson will stick to the story?" Marcus asked, his voice tight with anxiety. I could see the back of his sandy brown hair, the same color it had been when he was 5 years old and climbed into my lap for bedtime stories. Sarah's laugh was cold, calculating. "Please, Peterson owes me big time after those photos I took at the medical conference. He'll say whatever we need him to say. Besides, we've been setting this up for months. All those times I moved her pills around, switched her heart medication with sugar tablets, rearranged her kitchen cabinets. She actually thinks she's losing her mind." The air left my lungs. Those morning dizzy spells, the confusion when I couldn't find my reading glasses in their usual spot, the strange metallic taste in my coffee that I'd attributed to old age. It had all been deliberate, calculated, cruel. "I still don't like this," Marcus muttered as we turned onto Maple Street. "She raised me Sarah. She was there for every soccer game, every broken bone, every nightmare. And now she's sitting on $400,000 while we're struggling to make ends meet." Sarah snapped. "I'm pregnant, Marcus. We need that money for a real house, not this cramped apartment. Your mother won't even remember signing those papers once her condition progresses." Pregnant. This was the first I'd heard of a grandchild. My heart should have soared with joy, but instead it shattered into smaller pieces. They were using an unborn baby to justify destroying me. Sarah continued her assault on my son's conscience. "Remember what we did with my Aunt Margaret in Phoenix, same playbook, same results. $300,000, and she never knew what hit her. The state facility was actually better for her in the end." "Margaret died 6 months later," Marcus whispered. "Natural causes. Old age. These things happen." Sarah's tone was dismissive, as if human life was nothing more than an inconvenient detail. "Look, we've already intercepted her calls from Dorothy and Helen. As far as everyone knows, Blanca is becoming increasingly isolated and paranoid. The narrative is already set." Dorothy. My sister hadn't called in 3 weeks, which had been eating at me. Helen, my best friend since high school, had gone silent too. I'd assumed they were busy with their own lives, but now I understood. Sarah and Marcus had been systematically cutting me off from everyone who cared about me. The car stopped at a red light, and I risked shifting slightly to relieve the cramp building in my left leg. Through the gap between the seats, I caught a glimpse of Sarah's profile. Sharp cheekbones, perfectly styled blonde hair, the kind of polished beauty that had initially impressed me when Marcus first brought her home 2 years ago. Now that same face looked predatory, shark-like. "The lawyer is meeting us at Giuseppe's," Sarah said, checking her phone. "Vincent Russo. He's handled cases like this before. Cash only, no questions asked. He'll have the power of attorney documents ready, plus the commitment papers for Sunset Manor." Sunset Manor. I knew that place. A rundown nursing facility on the outskirts of town where families dumped relatives they couldn't be bothered to care for. The local newspaper had run exposés about neglect, abuse, suspicious deaths. The thought of ending my days there alone and forgotten made my stomach lurch. "The timing has to be perfect," Marcus said as the light turned green. "Tomorrow morning, right after her coffee. The mild sedative will make her compliant, but not obviously drugged. Peterson arrives at 10 with his official assessment. Russo at 10:30 with the papers. By noon, it's all legal. And then we start liquidating her assets, Sarah added with satisfaction. The house should sell quickly in this market. Her investment accounts are already set up for electronic transfer. Within a month, we'll have access to everything. I pressed my hand to my mouth to stifle a sob. These weren't strangers plotting against me. This was my son, the boy I'd rocked to sleep when thunderstorms scared him. The young man I'd helped through college, the adult I'd welcomed into my home every week for family dinners. And his wife, the woman I'd tried so hard to love despite her cold demeanor. The Honda pulled into Giuseppe's parking lot, and I realized this was my chance to escape before they discovered me. As they gathered their things and headed toward the restaurant entrance, I carefully opened the back door and slipped out, staying low behind the neighboring cars. My heart hammered against my ribs as I watched them disappear inside. Through the large windows of Giuseppe's, I could see them settling into a corner booth. A man in an expensive suit joined them within minutes. Vincent Russo, I assumed. Even from a distance, he looked like the type of lawyer you'd hire for dirty work rather than justice. I had to get home. I had to think. I had to figure out how to protect myself from the two people I'd trusted most in the world. But first, I needed to hear the rest of their conversation. Crouching behind a red pickup truck in Giuseppe's parking lot, I felt like a character in one of those crime shows Robert used to watch. Except this wasn't entertainment. This was my life unraveling in real time, and I was the victim who wasn't supposed to fight back. The restaurant's large windows gave me a clear view of Marcus, Sarah, and their lawyer companion. I pulled out my phone and opened the camera app, zooming in as much as possible. If I was going to survive this, I needed evidence. Vincent Russo spread several documents across the table, while Sarah gestured animatedly. Even through the glass, her body language screamed impatience and greed. Marcus sat slumped in his chair, looking like a man being dragged to his own execution. I edged closer, using the parked cars as cover until I was near the window. The restaurant's outdoor speakers were playing soft jazz, but I could catch fragments of conversation when other diners spoke loudly enough to force Sarah to raise her voice. The Arizona job went perfectly, I heard Sarah say as a family with young children passed by their table. Margaret signed everything without a single question. 300,000 just like that. Arizona job. So Aunt Margaret hadn't been their first victim. My stomach clenched as I realized I was dealing with career criminals, not desperate relatives making a terrible mistake. Russo pulled out what looked like medical files and spread them across the table. These are Margaret's psychological evaluations, he said, his voice carrying clearly now that the restaurant had quieted. We'll use the same template for your mother-in-law. Progressive dementia, increasing paranoia, inability to make rational financial decisions. What about the Phoenix authorities? Marcus asked. Did they ever investigate? Dead end, Russo replied with a satisfied smile. Margaret died of natural causes 6 months after the transfer. Old people die. No one questions it when they're already in state care. Sarah leaned forward eagerly. How many others have you handled? Counting Margaret and your upcoming situation. 12 successful cases across 4 states. Nevada, Colorado, Arizona, and now New Mexico. Total recovery of approximately $2.3 million from elderly targets. $2.3 million. 12 elderly victims. I wasn't just being betrayed by my family. I was being targeted by a criminal organization that specialized in destroying old people's lives. The key is the medical documentation, Russo continued. Dr. Peterson has been invaluable. His credentials are impeccable and he's motivated to cooperate. What kind of motivation? Marcus asked. Sarah's laugh was sharp and cruel. Let's just say Peterson has some expensive hobbies that his wife wouldn't approve of, plus those photos from the medical conference where he was very friendly with a certain pharmaceutical rep who wasn't his wife. Blackmail. They were blackmailing Dr. Peterson into providing false medical testimony. My mind raced back to my last appointment with Peterson 3 weeks ago. He'd seemed nervous, distracted, asking strange questions about my memory and decision-making abilities. Questions I'd answered honestly, not realizing they were being twisted into weapons against me. "The timeline for Blanca needs to be accelerated," Sarah said, pulling out her own phone. "I checked her bank statements last night. She's got more liquid assets than we initially thought, plus that life insurance payout from her husband's death." They'd been monitoring my bank accounts, violating my privacy, cataloging my assets like vultures circling prey. The life insurance money Robert had left me was meant to ensure I could live comfortably for the rest of my days. Instead, it had painted a target on my back. "There's one complication," Russo said, lowering his voice. I strained to hear. "The FBI has been investigating a pattern of elder fraud cases in the Southwest. Nothing that connects to us directly, but we need to be careful." "How careful?" Marcus asked, and I caught a note of hope in his voice, as if he wanted an excuse to back out. "Careful enough that after this case, I'm taking a break," Russo replied. "Too much heat, but this one is clean. All the documentation is in place, the medical evidence is solid, and the family dynamics are perfect. A devoted son concerned about his aging mother's mental decline." Sarah nodded enthusiastically. "Plus, we've already established the pattern with her neighbors. Mrs. Patterson thinks Blanca is becoming dangerous after that incident with the garden hose." I remembered that day. I'd been watering my roses when the hose kinked, causing water to spray everywhere. Mrs. Patterson had come running over, concerned that I was confused and flooding my yard. Now I realized Sarah must have deliberately kinked the hose and then called Mrs. Patterson to witness my apparent confusion. "What about her sister and the friend?" Russo asked. "Dorothy and Helen." "Handled," Sarah said smugly. "I told Dorothy that Blanca specifically asked not to be contacted because she was feeling overwhelmed. Helen got the same message. They both think they're respecting her wishes by staying away." The cruelty was breathtaking. Not only were they stealing my money and planning to lock me away, but they'd also systematically isolated me from everyone who might help. They'd turned my kindness and consideration into weapons, making my loved ones think they were protecting me by abandoning me. "The judge is set for next Friday," Russo continued. "Judge Morrison owes me favors from previous cases. He'll rubber stamp the competency ruling based on Peterson's evaluation." A corrupt judge, too. This wasn't just a family betrayal or even simple fraud. This was an organized criminal enterprise with connections throughout the legal and medical systems. How many other elderly people had fallen victim to this network? How many families had been destroyed? Marcus shifted in his chair, and for a moment our eyes nearly met through the window. I ducked lower behind the car, my heart pounding. When I risked another look, he was staring down at his hands, while Sarah and Russo continued planning my destruction. "After the competency hearing, how long before we can access her accounts?" Sarah asked. "Immediate access to checking and savings," Russo replied. "Investment accounts take a week or two for transfer. Real estate depends on market conditions, but in this area, probably 30 days maximum." "And she'll be in Sunset Manor by then?" "Oh, yes. Once someone is declared mentally incompetent and becomes a ward of the state, they have no rights. No visitors without approval, no access to phones or legal counsel. She'll be completely isolated." The casual way they discussed erasing my existence made my knees weak. In their minds, I was already gone, already buried, just a collection of assets to be divided and distributed. Sarah checked her watch. "We should go. I want to swing by Blanca's house tonight to plant a few more pieces of evidence. Maybe leave some unpaid bills scattered around, make it look like she's losing track of her finances." As they gathered their papers and prepared to leave, I realized I had to get home before them. They were planning to enter my house tonight to fabricate more evidence of my mental decline. But first, I needed to process everything I'd learned. I wasn't just fighting for my money or my freedom. I was fighting for my life against people who had already killed at least one person and were planning to sacrifice me for their greed. And my own son, the boy I'd loved more than my own life, was leading the charge. The weight of that betrayal threatened to crush me as I hurried toward the street to find a taxi. But underneath the pain, something else was growing. Something that felt like steel wrapped in velvet. They thought I was a helpless old woman, confused and isolated. They were about to learn just how wrong they were. The taxi ride home felt like traveling through a nightmare. Every familiar landmark looked different now, as if I was seeing my own neighborhood through the eyes of a stranger. The driver, a young man with kind eyes, kept glancing at me in the rearview mirror. "You okay, ma'am? You look like you've seen a ghost." If only he knew. "I'm fine, thank you, just tired." But I wasn't fine, and I wasn't just tired. I was furious. The kind of deep, burning fury that comes from realizing the people you trust most have been systematically destroying you while smiling to your face. I paid the driver and hurried inside my house, double-checking that all the doors were locked behind me. The familiar comfort of my home felt violated now. Every surface they might have touched, every possession they might have moved, every private space they'd invaded, while plotting against me. In the kitchen, I stared at my coffee maker with new eyes. How many mornings had I wondered about that strange metallic taste? How many times had I felt dizzy or confused after my morning coffee, attributing it to old age, when it was actually Sarah poisoning me? I dumped the entire contents of the coffee canister down the disposal and grabbed a bottle of water instead. From now on, nothing they could tamper with would pass my lips. My hands were shaking as I tried to process everything I'd learned. A criminal organization, blackmail, murder, corrupted judges and doctors, and at the center of it all, my son Marcus, the boy I'd raised to be honest and kind. I needed help, but Sarah had systematically cut me off from everyone who might provide it. Or had she? I picked up my landline and dialed Dorothy's number. It rang 3 times before my sister's familiar voice answered. "Blanca, oh my goodness, I've been so worried about you." "Worried? Why worried?" "Well, when Marcus called and said you needed some space because you were feeling overwhelmed, I respected that. But it's been 3 weeks, and I've been wondering if you were okay." "Marcus told you I needed space." "Actually, it was Sarah. She said you were having some health issues and that visitors were making you anxious. She asked us to give you time to adjust to your new medication." New medication. Another lie in their web of deception. "Dorothy, I need to see you, tonight if possible. And can you bring Helen?" Of course. But what about what Sarah said? "Sarah lied to you. About everything. Can you be here in an hour?" "We're on our way." After hanging up, I walked through my house with new purpose. If Sarah was planning to plant evidence tonight, I needed to understand what she might have already done. In my bedroom, I noticed my jewelry box had been moved slightly to the left. In the bathroom, my prescription bottles were arranged differently than I remembered. The living room felt wrong too. My reading glasses were on the coffee table instead of the side table where I always kept them. Small changes, subtle displacements designed to make me question my own memory and habits. But as I searched through Robert's old belongings for our important papers, I discovered something that made my pulse race with hope instead of fear. Hidden in the back of Robert's desk drawer behind our marriage certificate and insurance policies was a manila folder labeled Home Security System in his careful handwriting. Inside was a receipt from Secure Home Electronics dated 6 months before his death, along with installation diagrams and operating instructions. Robert had installed a complete wireless security system throughout our house without telling me. Hidden cameras in the living room, kitchen, bedrooms, even the basement. The central recording unit was concealed behind some old paint cans in the basement storage room. My hands trembled as I made my way downstairs and found the equipment exactly where the diagrams indicated. A compact digital recorder with multiple hard drives, still blinking with active recording lights. According to the instructions, it had been silently documenting everything that happened in our house for almost 3 years. Everything, including months of Marcus and Sarah's manipulations. I carried Robert's laptop downstairs and followed his step-by-step instructions for accessing the system. The interface was surprisingly user-friendly with a calendar display, showing recorded activity by date and time. I scrolled back through the past few months looking for days when I'd been at church or grocery shopping. What I found made me sick with rage and vindicated at the same time. Video after video of Sarah entering my house while I was gone. Footage of her switching my heart medication bottles, replacing the pills with identical-looking placebos. Recordings of her moving my belongings around, deliberately creating the confusion I'd been attributing to aging. One particularly damning video showed Marcus and Sarah in my kitchen 3 weeks ago while I was at my book club meeting. Sarah was coaching Marcus on how to hide my car keys and then pretend to help me look for them. Make sure she finds them somewhere completely illogical. Sarah's voice came through clearly on the audio. Like in the refrigerator or with the towels, we need her neighbors to witness these episodes. This feels wrong, Marcus replied. She's going to think she's losing her mind. That's the point, dummy. The more confused she seems, the easier it'll be to prove incompetence. I watch my son, my beloved boy, nod reluctantly and pocket my car keys. Later that same day, I remembered the frantic 20 minutes I'd spent looking for those keys, finally finding them in my linen closet with no memory of how they'd gotten there. Mrs. Patterson had been visiting when Marcus helped me search, and she'd witnessed me discovering the keys in such an illogical location. More videos revealed the scope of their manipulation. Sarah diluting my blood pressure medication with water. Marcus recording me with his phone during moments when I was understandably confused by their gaslighting, creating a library of evidence for Dr. Peterson's false diagnosis. The most chilling footage was from just last week, Sarah and Marcus in my living room discussing their timeline while I was at the grocery store. Peterson wants more evidence of cognitive decline, Sarah was saying. We need to escalate the incidents. What did you have in mind? I'm thinking we stage something public. Maybe she gets confused at the bank, tries to withdraw money she doesn't have, causes a scene. If the bank manager witnesses it, that's professional corroboration. Sarah, she could have a heart attack from the stress. The fake medication episodes are already dangerous enough. Old people have heart attacks. It's not our fault if she can't handle the pressure. The casual cruelty in her voice made me want to throw the laptop across the room. But I forced myself to keep watching to document every horrible detail. By the time Dorothy and Helen arrived, I had copied the most damaging footage onto 3 separate flash drives and hidden them in different locations throughout the house. I'd also printed still frames showing Sarah's face clearly as she tampered with my medication. Dorothy took one look at me and immediately wrapped me in a fierce hug. "Blanca, you look terrible. What's going on?" Helen, sharp-eyed and practical as always, was already scanning my living room. "Someone's been in here. I can tell. Your furniture is arranged differently than it was 3 weeks ago." I led them to the kitchen and told them everything. Every word I'd overheard in the car and at the restaurant. Every piece of evidence I'd discovered in Robert's security system. Every detail of the criminal organization that had targeted me for destruction. By the time I finished, both women were pale with shock and fury. "We're calling the police right now," Dorothy said, reaching for her phone. "Wait," Helen held up a hand. "If we call local police and they have a corrupt judge in their pocket, this could all disappear. We need federal authorities. This crosses state lines, involves organized crime." Helen's paralegal background was showing. Even in retirement, her legal instincts were sharp. "You're right," I agreed. "But first we need to let them complete their plan. If I act normal tomorrow morning, let them think they're succeeding, we can catch them in the act, with federal agents as witnesses." "Absolutely not," Dorothy protested. "It's too dangerous. What if something goes wrong?" "What if we don't try?" I countered. "They'll just move on to their next victim. How many more elderly people will die like Aunt Margaret E?" Helen was nodding slowly. "Blanca's right. If we can document the entire crime as it happens with federal agents present, we can shut down their whole operation." "But the fake medical evaluation, the drugs in her coffee," Dorothy argued, "they could seriously hurt her." "I'll dump the coffee when they're not looking," I said. "And I'll have Dr. Martinez, my real doctor, on standby to counter Peterson's lies. We can do this, but we have to be smart about it." Helen squeezed my hand. "You're braver than I would be in your situation." "I'm not brave." I replied, thinking of all the other elderly victims who hadn't had Robert's hidden cameras to protect them. I'm angry, and anger can be more powerful than fear when it's pointed in the right direction. As my sister and best friend helped me plan the next day's strategy, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months: hope. Not the naive hope of someone who trusts blindly, but the fierce hope of someone who refuses to go down without a fight. Sarah and Marcus thought they were hunting a helpless old woman. Tomorrow they were going to discover they'd cornered a lioness instead. Friday morning arrived gray and drizzling, matching my mood as I prepared to face the two people who'd been systematically poisoning me while planning my imprisonment. But beneath the dread adrenaline sharpened my senses like a knife's edge. I'd barely slept, spending the night reviewing Robert's security footage and copying additional evidence. What I'd discovered in those dark hours made the situation even more horrific. Sarah and Marcus had been planning this for over 8 months, since shortly after their wedding. Their honeymoon in Arizona hadn't been romantic. It had been a scouting trip to test their methods on Aunt Margaret. At 7 a.m, I called Dr. Martinez's office and spoke directly with him, explaining that I needed emergency cognitive testing due to concerns about my mental state. Dr. Martinez, who'd been my physician since Robert's death, was immediately alarmed. "Blanca, in all the time I've known you, you've shown no signs of cognitive decline whatsoever. Your last physical 3 months ago indicated you were in excellent mental and physical health for a woman your age. That's what I need documented officially. Can you see me this morning before 10? Come in at 8:30. I'll clear my schedule." The taxi ride to Dr. Martinez's office felt surreal. I was a woman preparing to prove her own sanity, while her family plotted her destruction. But Dr. Martinez's examination was thorough and reassuring. Memory tests, cognitive assessments, even blood work to check for any neurological indicators. "Blanca, your test results are completely normal," he said, signing official documentation. "Your cognitive function is that of someone 20 years younger. Whatever concerns you about your mental state, I can assure you they're unfounded." "What about someone who wanted to fake dementia symptoms?" I asked. "What would they have to do?" His face darkened with understanding. "Are you asking because someone is trying to manipulate your medical records?" I explained everything. Dr. Martinez listened with growing horror, then picked up his phone. "I'm calling the medical board about Dr. Peterson immediately. What you're describing is not just malpractice, it's criminal conspiracy. Can you also contact the FBI? I believe this is part of a larger pattern of elder abuse." Within an hour, I was sitting across from FBI agent Rebecca Torres in Dr. Martinez's office. Agent Torres was younger than I'd expected, maybe 40, with intelligent brown eyes that missed nothing. "Mrs. Johnson, what you're describing matches a pattern we've been investigating across multiple states. Elder fraud rings that target wealthy seniors, typically operating through family members or caregivers." "How many cases?" I asked. "Officially, 6 confirmed cases in the past 2 years. Unofficially, we suspect dozens more that were never reported. The victims are usually isolated, and when they die in state facilities, no one questions the circumstances." Agent Torres explained that they'd been tracking Vincent Russo for months, but hadn't been able to gather enough evidence for federal charges. "My security footage and first-hand testimony could be the key to exposing the entire organization. But I need you to understand the risks," she continued. "These people have killed before. If they realize you're onto them, you could be in serious danger." "I'm already in serious danger," I replied. "The difference is now I have a chance to fight back." After leaving Dr. Martinez's office, I stopped at Helen's apartment. My friend had spent the morning researching Sunset Manor and Vincent Russo online. "You're not going to like what I found," Helen said, spreading printouts across her kitchen table. "Sunset Manor has one of the highest mortality rates in the state. 23 deaths in the past year alone, mostly within 6 months of admission. Natural causes. Officially, yes. But look at this." She showed me a newspaper clipping from Phoenix. "Remember, Sarah mentioned Aunt Margaret Walsh, age 72, died of natural causes, 6 months after being declared incompetent. No family members present at the time of death. Margaret Walsh. Sarah's real last name was Walsh, not the Henderson she'd claimed when she married Marcus. Another layer of deception. There's more, Helen continued. I found obituaries for 3 other elderly people in Nevada and Colorado. All died within months of being declared incompetent. All had their assets transferred to family members shortly before death. The pattern was clear and chilling. This wasn't just financial fraud, it was systematic murder disguised as elder care. Helen, I need you to call Agent Torres and share all of this. The FBI needs to understand they're not just dealing with thieves, they're dealing with killers. When I returned home at 11:30, Sarah's car was already in my driveway. Through the window, I could see her in my kitchen, probably preparing the drugged coffee that would make me compliant for Dr. Peterson's fake evaluation. I took a deep breath, put on my most confused expression, and walked through my front door like a lamb to slaughter. "Oh, Blanca," Sarah called out sweetly. "Perfect timing, I just made fresh coffee." The kitchen smelled like vanilla and cinnamon, Sarah's attempt to mask the bitter taste of whatever sedative she'd added to my morning drink. She handed me my favorite mug, the one with tiny roses that Robert had given me for our 20th anniversary. "Thank you, dear. You're so thoughtful." I raised the mug to my lips, pretended to take a sip, then carried it with me as I moved around the kitchen. While Sarah busied herself with breakfast preparations, I dumped the entire contents into the sink and refilled the mug with water from the tap. "Marcus should be here soon," Sarah said, not looking at me. "He's been so worried about your memory issues." Memory issues. I tried to sound genuinely confused. "Oh, sweetheart, we've talked about this. The missing car keys, the unpaid bills, forgetting to take your medication. Dr. Peterson is coming by this morning to check on you." She was setting the stage, establishing the narrative that would justify everything that followed. I played my part, nodding uncertainly and asking questions that suggested confusion about my own mental state. "I have been feeling foggy lately," I admitted. "Maybe Dr. Peterson can help." Sarah's smile was predatory. "I'm sure he can." Marcus arrived 20 minutes later, looking haggard and guilty. He barely met my eyes as he kissed my cheek and asked how I was feeling. "Your mother seems a bit disoriented this morning," Sarah reported. "She couldn't remember having coffee even though she just finished a cup." The lie came so naturally to her. I realized I was looking at a sociopath, someone who could destroy lives without feeling the slightest remorse. Dr. Peterson arrived at exactly 10 o'clock carrying an expensive-looking briefcase and wearing the nervous expression of a man being blackmailed into committing crimes. He was younger than I'd expected, maybe 50, with prematurely gray hair and worried eyes. "Mrs. Johnson, thank you for seeing me on such short notice. Your family is concerned about some changes in your cognitive function." "What kind of changes?" I asked, continuing to play confused. "Memory lapses difficulty with decision-making, possible disorientation. Standard evaluations for someone your age who might be experiencing early-stage dementia." The word dementia was like a knife to my heart, even though I knew it was false. How many real elderly patients had Peterson terrorized with fake diagnoses? How many families had he destroyed for money? Peterson's examination was a farce. Leading questions designed to make me appear confused. Tests that he scored incorrectly right in front of me. Observations that contradicted everything he was writing on his evaluation forms. "Mrs. Johnson, can you tell me what year it is?" 2024. He wrote something on his form, then looked up with fake concern. "And who is the current president?" "Joe Biden." The answer was correct, but Peterson's expression suggested otherwise. "I see. And can you remember what you had for breakfast this morning?" I genuinely couldn't remember because Sarah's presence in my kitchen had distracted me from eating anything. But Peterson interpreted my momentary pause as evidence of cognitive decline. The entire evaluation took 30 minutes. 30 minutes to destroy a lifetime of independence and dignity based on lies and manipulation. "I'm afraid the results are concerning," Peterson announced to Marcus and Sarah, speaking as if I wasn't in the room. significant short-term memory loss, disorientation, inability to process complex information. Combined with the family's observations of recent behavior changes, I'd recommend immediate intervention. What kind of intervention? Marcus asked. He still looked sick about the whole situation, but he wasn't stopping it. Supervised care, limited decision-making authority, possible guardianship proceedings, for her own safety and protection. Sarah nodded gravely. We've been so worried. Just last week she left the stove on all night. Could have burned the house down. Another lie. I hadn't used the stove in days, but Peterson wrote it down as if it were established fact. Dr. Peterson. I said, trying to sound confused rather than angry. Are you saying I can't take care of myself anymore? Mrs. Johnson dementia is a progressive condition. The kindest thing your family can do is ensure you receive appropriate care before the symptoms worsen. Appropriate care. As if Sunset Manor's record of suspicious deaths represented kindness rather than murder. After Peterson left, Sarah and Marcus spent an hour discussing my condition and what needed to be done. I sat in my living room pretending to be confused and scared while they planned my imprisonment with the casual efficiency of people who'd done this before. The lawyer will be here at noon, Sarah said. Everything is set up for the power of attorney transfer. Once that's signed, we can start the guardianship proceedings. And Sunset Manor. They're expecting her Monday morning. I've already filled out the admission paperwork. Monday morning. In 4 days, I was supposed to be locked away in a facility where 23 elderly people had died in the past year. The timeline was accelerating faster than I'd expected. But as I sat there listening to them plan my destruction, I felt surprisingly calm, because hidden in my purse was a tiny recording device that Agent Torres had given me. Every word they'd spoken was being captured for federal prosecutors. And in 2 hours, Vincent Russo would arrive with forged legal documents, unaware that FBI agents would be watching and recording his every move. The trap was set. Now all I had to do was survive long enough to spring it. At 11:30, I excused myself to use the bathroom, claiming the coffee had upset my stomach. Sarah's satisfied smile told me she attributed my discomfort to whatever drug she'd put in the mug I'd pretended to drink. In the bathroom, I checked the tiny recording device Agent Torres had taped to my chest. Still working, still capturing every damning word. Through the thin walls, I could hear Marcus and Sarah discussing logistics for the afternoon. After Russo leaves, we need to start moving her valuable items to storage, Sarah was saying. The jewelry, the art, anything that might disappear before the estate sale. What if she notices things missing? Marcus Honey, in 6 hours, she's going to be legally incompetent. What she notices won't matter anymore. I leaned against the bathroom door, fighting waves of nausea that had nothing to do with fake coffee. The casual way they discussed erasing my existence was breathtaking in its cruelty. A soft knock interrupted my thoughts. Blanca, are you all right in there? Marcus called. Just feeling a bit dizzy, I replied, making my voice sound weak and confused. Here, let me help you. He opened the door gently, and for a moment I saw a flash of the caring boy I'd raised. Then Sarah appeared behind him, and his expression hardened again. Maybe we should call Dr. Peterson back, Sarah suggested. She seems to be deteriorating more rapidly than expected. No need to bother him, I said quickly. I'm just tired. This has been a confusing morning. Sarah exchanged a meaningful look with Marcus. Of course it has, sweetheart. That's why we're here to help. Help. The word tasted like poison in my mouth. At exactly noon, Vincent Russo arrived carrying a leather briefcase and wearing the kind of expensive suit that criminals buy when they've stolen enough money to afford respectability. He was shorter than I'd expected from seeing him in the restaurant with slicked back hair and the dead eyes of someone who'd spent years destroying lives for profit. Mrs. Johnson, he said with practiced sympathy. I'm Vincent Russo, the attorney handling your family's legal concerns. I understand you've been having some health challenges. I'm not sure what kind of challenges, I replied, trying to look bewildered. Everyone keeps talking about my memory, but I feel fine. Russo's smile was patronizing. That's very common with your condition. Many people don't recognize their own cognitive decline. That's why it's so important to have family members who can make decisions on your behalf. He spread documents across my dining room table with the efficiency of someone who'd done this many times before. Power of attorney forms medical directives, property transfer agreements, every paper designed to strip away my rights and hand control to Marcus and Sarah. These documents will ensure you receive the best possible care. Russo explained, pointing to signature lines marked with yellow sticky notes. Your son and daughter-in-law will handle your financial affairs, so you don't have to worry about complicated decisions. As I pretended to study the papers, I noticed details that revealed their true purpose. The power of attorney was written to take effect immediately, not just if I became incapacitated. The medical directive gave Marcus authority to make all healthcare decisions, including committing me to long-term care facilities. The property transfer forms would give Sarah access to my bank accounts within 24 hours. This seems like a lot of paperwork, I said, stalling for time. Maybe I should have my own lawyer review it. Mrs. Johnson. Russo's voice carried a subtle threat. According to Dr. Peterson's evaluation, you're not capable of making complex legal decisions. These documents are for your protection. Delaying could put you and your assets at risk. Sarah moved closer, her hand resting on my shoulder, in what might have looked like comfort but felt like restraint. Blanca, we just want what's best for you. You trust us, don't you? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Did I trust them? These people who'd been poisoning me, isolating me, planning to lock me away to die. These criminals who'd already murdered at least one elderly woman and were preparing to add me to their list. Of course I trust you, I lied. You're my family. Marcus flinched at the word family, and for a moment I thought he might confess everything and put an end to this nightmare. But Sarah's grip tightened on my shoulder, and whatever moment of conscience he'd experienced passed. Then let's get these signed so we can focus on getting you the help you need, Sarah said sweetly. I picked up the pen Russo offered, aware that every movement was being recorded by the FBI surveillance team positioned outside. This was the crucial moment. If I signed these papers even under duress, it would complicate any legal case against them. But if I refused, they might realize I knew about their plan. Actually, I said, setting the pen down, I'd like to understand something first. What exactly is wrong with me? Russo's eyes narrowed slightly. Mrs. Johnson, we've already discussed your condition. Dr. Peterson explained that you have early-stage dementia. But I feel fine. My thinking seems clear to me. What if Dr. Peterson made a mistake? Medical professionals don't make mistakes about dementia diagnoses, Sarah said firmly. The tests are very reliable. What tests? I pressed. Dr. Peterson asked me a few questions, but I don't remember taking any brain scans or blood tests. An uncomfortable silence fell over the room. Russo clearly hadn't expected resistance from someone who was supposed to be confused and compliant. Mrs. Johnson, he said with forced patience, your family has observed significant changes in your behavior over recent months. Missing items, forgotten appointments, confusion about daily activities. These are classic early symptoms. But what if those things happened for other reasons? What if someone was moving my things around or interfering with my phone calls or putting something in my food to make me confused? The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Sarah's hand tightened on my shoulder until her nails dug into my skin. Marcus went very still, and Russo's practiced smile faltered. Mrs. Johnson, Russo said carefully, what you're describing sounds like paranoid ideation, which is another common symptom of dementia. The belief that family members are plotting against you is a classic sign of cognitive decline. Paranoid ideation. They had an answer for everything, a way to twist any resistance into evidence of mental illness. How many other elderly victims had tried to fight back only to have their protests dismissed as symptoms of the very condition being used to destroy them? I suppose you're right, I said, picking up the pen again. If everyone thinks I'm sick, I must be sick. But as I moved to sign the first document, the front door opened and a voice called out, "Mrs. Johnson, this is Agent Torres with the FBI. We have a warrant." The transformation in the room was instantaneous. Sarah jerked her hand away from my shoulder as if I'd caught fire. Marcus jumped to his feet, knocking over his chair. Russo swept the documents off the table and tried to stuff them back into his briefcase. "Nobody move," Agent Torres commanded as she entered with 3 other federal agents. "Vincent Russo, Marcus Johnson, Sarah Henderson. You're all under arrest for conspiracy to commit elder fraud, falsification of medical records, and interstate racketeering." "There's been some mistake," Sarah protested, but her voice was shaking. "We're just trying to help Marcus's mother with her medical condition." "The medical condition you've been faking for 8 months," Agent Torres replied. "We have video evidence of you tampering with Mrs. Johnson's medication and deliberately creating confusion to support a false dementia diagnosis." Sarah's face went white. "That's impossible." "Security cameras," I said, standing up slowly and removing the recording device from under my shirt. "My husband installed them before he died. They've been recording everything you've done to me for the past 8 months. The look on Marcus's face broke my heart. Shock, horror, and a desperate kind of relief all mixed together. "Mom, I'm so sorry. I never wanted this to happen." "But you let it happen anyway," I replied, "for money." Agent Torres was reading them their rights while other agents secured the forged documents Russo had tried to hide. As the handcuffs clicked around Sarah's wrists, she turned to me with pure hatred in her eyes. "You think you've won something? You're still a lonely old woman with no real family. Marcus will never forgive you for this." "Sarah," Agent Torres interrupted. "You have the right to remain silent. I suggest you use it." As they led my son and his wife away in handcuffs, Marcus looked back at me one more time. "Mom, there's something you need to know about why I—" "Save it for your lawyer," Sarah snapped. "Don't say anything else." But I could see in Marcus's eyes that there was more to this story. Something Sarah had used against him, some leverage that had made him vulnerable to her manipulation. Whatever it was, I was determined to find out. Because despite everything he'd done, despite the betrayal and the cruelty, Marcus was still the boy I'd raised. And if there was any chance of saving him from the monster he'd become, I owed it to both of us to try. But first, I had some monsters to help destroy. The FBI search of my house took 3 hours. Agent Torres and her team photographed everything, collected the security equipment Robert had installed, and documented months of evidence that Sarah and Marcus had unknowingly provided through their criminal activities. As the agents worked, I sat in my kitchen with Dr. Martinez, who'd arrived to check on my health after the traumatic morning. My blood pressure was elevated, but considering I'd just helped bring down a criminal conspiracy, he said that was understandable. "Blanca, what you did today was incredibly brave," he said, taking my pulse, "and incredibly dangerous. These people were willing to kill to protect their operation." "They already had killed," I replied, thinking of Aunt Margaret and the 23 mysterious deaths at Sunset Manor. I wasn't going to let them add more victims to their list. Agent Torres joined us at the kitchen table carrying a thick folder of documents they'd confiscated from Vincent Russo. "Mrs. Johnson, what we found in his briefcase is going to help us prosecute cases across 4 states. Financial records, falsified medical reports, contacts with corrupt judges and doctors. This operation was much larger than we initially realized." "How much larger?" "Conservative estimate, they've stolen over $3 million from elderly victims in the past 2 years. And that's just what we can document so far. $3 million. Dozens of destroyed families. Lives cut short by greed and callous disregard for human dignity." "What about Dr. Peterson?" I asked. "Already in custody. When we showed him the evidence of his involvement, he broke down completely. Apparently Sarah Walsh, that's her real name, had been blackmailing him for 18 months. She had photographs of him engaged in inappropriate behavior at medical conferences." "And the corrupt judge?" "Judge Morrison is being investigated by the State Judicial Council. If Peterson's testimony is accurate, Morrison took bribes to rubber stamp competency rulings in at least 6 cases. As Agent Torres spoke, another agent approached our table. "Ma'am, we've finished processing the security footage. There's something you need to see." They set up a laptop on my kitchen table and showed me video from 3 weeks ago, footage I hadn't seen during my initial review of the evidence. It was from my living room late at night, showing Marcus alone, while Sarah waited in their car outside. In the video, Marcus was pacing back and forth talking on his phone. The audio was clear enough to understand his side of the conversation. "I can't do this anymore, Sarah. She's not getting confused enough from the medication switches. Maybe we should just stop." He paused, listening to Sarah's response. "What do you mean you'll tell everyone? Tell them what?" Another pause, longer this time. Marcus's face went pale. "That's not fair. I was 18 when that happened. I was scared and confused, and she helped me through it. Using that against me now is—" He stopped talking, apparently interrupted by Sarah's reply. "No, you're right. She can't find out like that. But what you're asking me to do isn't protecting anyone. It's just cruel." The conversation continued for several more minutes, with Marcus becoming increasingly distressed. Finally, he said something that made my blood run cold. "Sarah, if you tell her I was adopted, please don't make it sound like she chose wrong. She and Dad saved my life when they took me in. Whatever happens with this money situation, I need her to know that I'm grateful." Adopted. The word hit me like a physical blow. Marcus thought he was adopted. Agent Torres. I said, my voice barely a whisper. "I need to speak with my son immediately." "Mrs. Johnson, he's in federal custody. Arranging a meeting will take time and—" "You don't understand. He's not adopted. I gave birth to him, but somehow Sarah convinced him that he was, and she's been using that lie to manipulate him into betraying me." Agent Torres frowned. "Are you certain sometimes family secrets—" "I'm certain." My voice was getting stronger as the pieces fell into place. "I have his birth certificate, hospital records from his delivery photos from the day he was born. Sarah researched my family, found out that Robert and I struggled with infertility for years before Marcus was born. She twisted that into a lie that made him feel insecure about his place in our family." Dr. Martinez looked up from his notes. That would explain his psychological profile during this morning's interviews. Classic symptoms of someone struggling with identity issues and fear of abandonment. "Can you get him here?" I asked Agent Torres. Not for questioning, just for 5 minutes so I can show him the truth. Agent Torres consulted with her colleagues, then nodded. "We can arrange a supervised meeting. He hasn't been formally charged yet, so there's some flexibility. But Mrs. Johnson, you need to understand, even if Sarah manipulated him with lies, he still participated in a conspiracy to defraud you. That has legal consequences." "I understand, but first I need him to understand who he really is." An hour later, Marcus sat across from me at my kitchen table, still in handcuffs but no longer looking like a criminal. He looked like a broken young man who'd lost his way. "Mom," he said, tears streaming down his face, "I'm so sorry. I never wanted to hurt you. But when Sarah told me about the adoption, about how you and Dad never really wanted me—" "Stop." I reached across the table and took his handcuffed hands in mine. "Marcus, look at me. You are not adopted. You never were. I gave birth to you in Mercy General Hospital on March 15th, 1995, after 26 hours of labor that nearly killed us both." His eyes widened, but Sarah showed me documents. Forged documents. Just like everything else she's shown you. I pulled out the folder I'd retrieved from my bedroom safe. "Here's your real birth certificate. Here are the hospital photos from the day you were born. Here's the bracelet they put on your wrist that says, 'Baby Johnson, born to Blanca and Robert Johnson.'" Marcus stared at the documents with growing amazement and horror. She lied about this too. She lied about everything. The adoption story was just another tool to control you, to make you feel insecure about your place in our family, so you'd be willing to betray me to keep her happy. But why would she? He stopped, understanding flooding his face. Because if I believed I wasn't really your son, it would be easier to convince me that stealing from you wasn't really that wrong. And because she knew that if you ever learned the truth, you'd realize how much we loved you, how much we chose you every single day, not because we had to, but because we wanted to. Agent Torres had been watching silently, but now she leaned forward. Marcus, we need you to understand something. Sarah Walsh isn't who she claims to be. Her real name is Sandra Walsh. She's wanted in connection with similar elder fraud schemes in 3 other states. You weren't her partner, you were her victim too. Marcus looked stunned. Sandra, but her driver's license says Sarah Henderson. Forged like the adoption documents. We believe she targeted you specifically because of your family situation, your mother's financial status, the fact that she was recently widowed and potentially vulnerable. Sarah researched your family for months before she ever met you. The full scope of Sarah's manipulation was becoming clear. She hadn't fallen in love with Marcus and then conceived a plan to steal from his mother. She'd identified me as a target first, then strategically seduced my son as part of a long-term criminal scheme. How long ago did you meet her? I asked. 18 months ago, at that coffee shop near my work. Marcus was thinking back, connecting dots. She seemed so interested in my family, asked lots of questions about you and Dad. I thought she was just being friendly. She was gathering intelligence, Agent Torres said. We found similar patterns in her previous cases. She identifies vulnerable elderly targets, then infiltrates their families through romantic relationships with adult children or grandchildren. I watched my son process this information, seeing the guilt and self-blame in his expression. Marcus, this is not your fault. You were manipulated by a professional criminal who specialized in psychological abuse. But I still did it, Mom. I still helped her try to steal from you. I moved your things around. I lied to Dr. Peterson. I was ready to sign papers putting you in that terrible nursing home. After she convinced you that I wasn't really your mother, after she made you believe that our family bond was a lie. I squeezed his hands tighter. Son, you were a victim too. The difference is, you can choose to stop being a victim now. Agent Torres cleared her throat. Marcus, we'd like you to consider testifying against Sarah and the others. Your insider knowledge of their operation could help us prosecute similar cases across multiple states. What would happen to me? That depends on several factors. Your cooperation with the investigation, the extent of your involvement, whether you were acting under duress. Given what we've learned about Sarah's manipulation tactics, a prosecutor might consider reduced charges or alternative sentencing. I looked at my son, seeing past the mistakes to the frightened young man Sarah had expertly manipulated. Marcus, whatever happens legally, I want you to know something. You are my son. You were chosen and wanted and loved from the moment you were conceived. Nothing Sarah did, nothing you did while under her influence can change that. He broke down completely, then sobbing with the kind of raw grief that comes from realizing how thoroughly you've been deceived. But underneath the pain, I could see relief. The relief of finally knowing the truth about who he was and where he belonged. Can you forgive me? He whispered. There's nothing to forgive, I replied. You're home now, that's all that matters. But even as I comforted my son, I knew the hardest part was still ahead. Sarah Walsh was facing federal charges that could put her away for decades, and she wasn't going down without a fight. The trial would be brutal, forcing us to relive every detail of her manipulation and betrayal. Still, for the first time in months, I felt genuinely hopeful. My son was alive and free from Sarah's influence. A criminal organization had been exposed and would face justice, and I had learned something important about my own strength. When evil people had tried to destroy me, I hadn't just survived. I had fought back and won. 6 months later, I stood in the hallway outside Federal District Court, watching Sarah Walsh being led away in shackles after receiving a 15-year sentence for elder fraud, conspiracy racketeering, and accessory to murder in the death of Margaret Walsh. Her face was a mask of cold fury, but she no longer held any power over my family. Vincent Russo had received 20 years as the ringleader of an operation that had stolen over $4 million from elderly victims across 6 states. Dr. Peterson got 5 years and permanent loss of his medical license, though his cooperation with prosecutors had helped expose a network of corrupt medical professionals stretching from Arizona to Colorado. Judge Morrison was serving 3 years in minimum security prison and would never work in the legal system again. But the victory that mattered most to me wasn't in any courtroom. It was sitting beside me on the wooden bench, watching his wife's conviction with a mixture of relief and sadness. Marcus had indeed testified against Sarah and her accomplices, providing crucial insider information that helped federal prosecutors build cases against dozens of criminals. His cooperation, combined with evidence of the psychological abuse he'd endured, had resulted in 2 years of probation and 500 hours of community service, rather than prison time. More importantly, he'd spent the past 6 months in therapy working through the trauma of Sarah's manipulation and rebuilding his sense of self-worth. The transformation was remarkable. The anxious, guilty young man Sarah had molded into a weapon against me had become the confident, caring son I'd always known him to be. "How do you feel?" I asked as we watched the courthouse doors close behind Sarah's transport vehicle. "Free," he said simply. "For the first time in 18 months, I feel completely free." We rode home together in comfortable silence, past the coffee shop where Sarah had first approached him, past the restaurant where I'd overheard their plotting, past all the places that had once represented deception and betrayal, but now felt like stations on a journey toward healing. At home, Marcus helped me prepare dinner for a celebration that had been months in the planning. Dorothy and Helen were coming along with Dr. Martinez and Agent Torres, who'd become close friends during the investigation and trial. But most importantly, Marcus was bringing Jennifer Martinez, Dr. Martinez's daughter, whom he'd met during a victim support group meeting. Jennifer was everything Sarah had pretended to be: genuine, kind, interested in Marcus for who he truly was, rather than what she could steal from his family. She was a teacher at the local elementary school, and when Marcus talked about her, his face lit up with the kind of joy I hadn't seen from him since childhood. "Mom," Marcus said as we set the table, "I want you to know something. Jennifer and I have been talking about getting married." My heart soared. "That's wonderful news. Have you proposed?" "Not yet. I wanted to ask your permission first. I know that might sound old-fashioned, but after everything that happened with Sarah, I need to know that the people I love approve of the person I choose to spend my life with." The request touched me deeply. It showed how much he'd learned about the importance of family bonds and healthy relationships. "Marcus, you don't need my permission to marry someone you love. But for what it's worth, Jennifer is exactly the kind of woman I'd want for my son. She's genuine, intelligent, and most importantly, she loves you for who you are, not what you might provide for her." "There's something else," he continued. "We want you to officiate the wedding." I nearly dropped the plate I was holding. "Officiate Marcus. I'm not ordained." "You can get ordained online. It only takes a few minutes. Mom, you're the one who taught me what real love looks like through your marriage with Dad. You're the one who saved me from Sarah's lies. Having you marry us would mean everything to me." Tears blurred my vision as I embraced my son. I would be honored. The celebration that evening was everything I dreamed of during those dark months when I thought I'd lost Marcus forever. Agent Torres told us that our case had led to new federal legislation, strengthening protections for elderly Americans and creating harsher penalties for elder abuse crimes. Dr. Martinez reported that Dr. Peterson's cooperation had exposed corruption in nursing homes across 3 states, leading to improved oversight and better care for vulnerable residents. Helen announced that she was coming out of retirement to work with a legal aid society, providing free legal services to elder abuse victims. And Dorothy surprised everyone by announcing her engagement to Agent Torres's father, a widowed FBI analyst who'd helped process evidence in my case. As the evening wound down and our guests prepared to leave, Jennifer pulled me aside. "Mrs. Johnson, I want you to know how grateful I am that you fought back against Sarah. If you hadn't exposed her operation, Marcus might never have learned the truth about who he really was. We might never have met." "You would have found each other eventually," I replied. "Good people have a way of recognizing each other even in the darkness." After everyone left, Marcus and I sat on my front porch watching the sunset and talking about his upcoming proposal and wedding plans. "Mom, can I ask you something that's been bothering me?" "Of course." "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I hadn't gotten into Sarah's car that day? If you hadn't overheard her plans?" I considered the question seriously. "I think about it sometimes. I think about all the elderly people who weren't as lucky as I was, who didn't have security cameras or family members willing to help them fight back." "That's why you started the foundation." "The Dorothy Foundation, named for my sister who dropped everything to help me when I needed her most. In 6 months, we'd helped recover stolen assets for 37 elder abuse victims and provided legal support for dozens more. We'd also created educational programs to help families recognize the warning signs of financial exploitation. I started the foundation because I realized my experience wasn't unique," I said. "Sarah's operation targeted dozens of families. Other criminal rings are still out there, still targeting vulnerable elderly people. If sharing my story can help even one family avoid what we went through, then everything we endured was worthwhile." Marcus nodded thoughtfully. "Jennifer wants to volunteer with the foundation after we're married. She thinks her teaching background could help with the educational programs. She'd be wonderful at that work. And Marcus, I'm proud of the man you've become. Not just despite what happened with Sarah, but in some ways because of it. You learned hard lessons about manipulation and abuse, but you also learned about forgiveness and redemption. Those lessons will make you a better husband, father, and human being." 3 months later, I stood in my garden on a perfect autumn afternoon, watching Marcus and Jennifer exchange vows they'd written themselves. Jennifer promised to love Marcus for who he truly was, not who she wanted him to become. Marcus promised to never again doubt his worth or his place in our family. When it came time for me to pronounce them husband and wife, I spoke from the heart about the power of real love to heal even the deepest wounds. "Marriage isn't just about two people choosing each other," I said. "It's about choosing each other again and again every day, especially when life gets difficult. It's about building a foundation of trust so strong that no outside force can shake it. And it's about understanding that family isn't defined by blood or legal documents, but by the choice to love unconditionally." As Marcus and Jennifer kissed to seal their marriage, I thought about Robert and how proud he would have been of this moment. His hidden security cameras had saved our family, but more than that, his example of unconditional love had given me the strength to fight for my son even when that son was trying to destroy me. The wedding reception was held in the same garden where Sarah had once planned to stage my final humiliation. Instead, it became a celebration of love, triumphant over deception, family bonds stronger than criminal conspiracies, and the power of truth to heal even the deepest betrayals. As the evening ended and the last guest departed, Marcus approached me with tears in his eyes. "Mom, I need to say something I should have said months ago. Thank you for never giving up on me. Thank you for seeing through Sarah's lies to the truth of who I really am. And thank you for showing me what it means to fight for the people you love." "You don't need to thank me for loving you," I replied. "That's what mothers do, what families do. We fight for each other no matter how dark things get." Looking back on that terrible period when my own family was plotting against me, I realize now that it taught me something profound about the nature of true strength. Strength isn't about avoiding betrayal or pain. It's about how you respond when the worst happens. It's about choosing to fight back rather than surrender. It's about believing in yourself even when everyone around you questions your reality. Most importantly, it's about understanding that love, real love, doesn't make you weak or vulnerable. It makes you fierce. It makes you willing to do whatever it takes to protect the people who matter most. Sarah Walsh thought she was targeting a helpless old woman who could be easily manipulated and discarded. Instead, she encountered a mother who would move heaven and earth to save her son, even when that son was helping to destroy her. She learned too late that underestimating the power of a mother's love was the biggest mistake she could possibly make. Now, as I write this story, Marcus and Jennifer have been married for 6 months and are expecting their first child. My first grandchild will grow up in a family built on truth rather than deception, love rather than manipulation, and the understanding that real family bonds can't be broken by lies or greed. The Dorothy Foundation continues to grow, helping families across the country recognize and fight back against elder abuse. We've helped recover over $2 million in stolen assets and provided support for more than 100 families who found themselves facing situations similar to what I experienced. Every time we help someone fight back against financial predators, every time we expose a corrupt doctor or lawyer, every time we prevent an elderly person from being locked away in a substandard facility, I think about Aunt Margaret and all the other victims who didn't have the resources or support to defend themselves. Their memory drives me to keep fighting, to keep speaking out, to keep proving that growing older doesn't mean becoming powerless. If my story teaches you anything, let it be this: trust your instincts. Question sudden changes in the people you love. Document everything. Build a support network of people who truly care about your well-being. And never ever let anyone convince you that you're too old or too confused to fight for yourself. Most importantly, remember that family is defined by love, not biology or legal documents. The people who truly belong in your life will stand by you when times get tough. The people who try to manipulate or control you were never really family to begin with. What experiences have you had with family members who turned out to be different than they seemed? Have you ever had to fight to protect yourself or someone you loved from people who claim to care about you? Your stories matter, and sharing them helps others recognize the warning signs of manipulation and abuse. I encourage you to like this video if it resonated with you, subscribe to hear more stories of people who refuse to be victims, and share this with anyone who might benefit from understanding how elder abuse really works. Together, we can create a community that protects and supports our most vulnerable members. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, you are never too old to fight back, never too alone to find help, and never too hurt to heal. The truth has a power that no amount of lies can overcome, and love, real love, always wins in the end. May you find the strength to protect yourself and the people you care about, and may you never stop believing in your own worth, no matter what anyone else tries to tell you.